Have you ever lost 3 hours of your life and woken up questioning your own sanity? Like, I'm not talking about losing track of time scrolling social media or whatever. I'm talking about sitting in your car at 9 p.m. in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot in Providence, Rhode Island, and the next thing you know it's midnight and you're 30 miles outside the city with no memory of how you got there. Because that's exactly what happened to me last year, and oh my god, it completely shattered everything I thought I understood about reality. Hi, my name is Arya Chen and I'm 26 years old, and I need to tell you this story before I start questioning if I'm losing my mind completely. I live in Providence. Well, I used to live there before I started having these experiences. Now I'm not really sure where I belong, you know? Like, I mean, sometimes I don't even feel like myself anymore, and I know that sounds crazy. Trust me, I know. But I need to tell someone because I've been carrying this secret for over a year, and it's eating me alive. The constant doubt. The sleepless nights wondering if I'm having some kind of breakdown, the way my own colleagues look at me now like something's off. But before we dive in, let me give you some context about who I was before all this started. Because that person, sometimes I wonder if she ever really existed. I was working as a marine biologist at the University of Rhode Island. Logic, science, evidence-based research, that was my entire world, you know. I had zero interest in anything paranormal or spiritual. I mean, I was the type of person who would roll my eyes at astrology and literally laugh at people who claimed they'd seen UFOs. And I need you to understand that because what happened to me, it doesn't make sense from any scientific perspective I know. But it happened. At least, I think it happened. Sometimes I'm not even sure anymore, so let me start from the beginning and oh my god, I can't believe I'm actually telling this story publicly. I'm probably destroying what's left of my career by even talking about this. Growing up in Cranston, Rhode Island, I was always the practical one in my family. My grandmother on my mom's side was really into what she called ancient Chinese wisdom. You know, reading tea leaves. Talking about key energy, all that stuff that I thought was complete nonsense. My mom would get so frustrated with her. She'd be like, "Ma, stop filling Arya's head with superstitions." And I agreed with my mom completely, you know. I was focused on school, on getting good grades, on building a career in marine science. I went to URI for both my bachelor's and master's degrees. I was studying bioluminescence and deep-sea creatures, you know, how they create their own light. Ironic, considering the lights I'd see later, right? But I'm getting ahead of myself here. I was this focused, rational person. I had my life planned out. I was going to get my PhD, work for NOAA, maybe discover some new species of deep-sea fish. Normal stuff, safe stuff, predictable stuff, but there were always these weird little things that I just ignored. And now I realize I should have paid attention, you know. Or maybe I'm just retrofitting meaning onto random events because I'm desperate to make sense of what happened later. I honestly don't know anymore. Like sometimes I would know exactly what my lab partner was going to say before they said it. Or I'd have these really vivid dreams about being underwater in places that definitely weren't Earth. The water was different, you know, thicker, almost like breathing liquid light, but I rationalized everything away. Stress dreams, coincidence, whatever. I had a scientific explanation for everything because that's what scientists do, right? We explain things. We don't believe in magic or mysteries. The first really strange thing happened in early 2023, and oh my god, I should have known something was wrong then. Or maybe nothing was wrong and I'm just losing my grip on reality. I honestly can't tell the difference anymore. I was doing fieldwork in Narragansett Bay. This was in June, so the water was finally warming up. I was collecting samples for my research on nocturnal plankton behavior, and I saw these lights under the water, not bioluminescence, you know. I've studied that for years. I know what natural underwater light looks like. These were different. They were moving in this geometric pattern, like a perfect triangle formation, and they were huge. I mean, each light was probably the size of a car, and they were moving together about 20 feet below the surface. I watched them for maybe 10 minutes through my equipment, documenting everything like the good little scientist I was. My hands were shaking. I remember that now. At the time, I told myself it was just excitement at discovering something new, but looking back, I think some part of me already knew this wasn't natural. Or maybe I'm just imagining that now because I need to believe I had some control, some awareness of what was happening. Then they just disappeared. Not gradually, like they swam away. They just vanished instantly, like someone had turned off a light switch. I sat in my research boat thinking, okay, Arya, what the hell was that? But then my logical brain kicked in. Maybe it was some kind of military submarine testing. We have the Naval War College right here in Newport, right? Lots of underwater technology being developed. I convinced myself it was classified military equipment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had seen me too. Like, I felt watched for weeks after that. I'd be working alone in the lab late at night, and I'd get this overwhelming sensation that something was observing me. I started jumping at shadows, you know. Me, this rational scientist, acting like a scared child. And I keep asking myself, was that feeling real, or was I already starting to lose my grip on reality? The nosebleeds started around August 2023. Oh my god, the nosebleeds. I'd never had nosebleeds in my life, and suddenly I was getting these random ones that would come out of nowhere. Not little trickles. I'm talking about substantial bleeding that would soak through tissues and leave stains on my lab coats. I went to my doctor, Dr. Martinez. She's been my physician since I was a kid. She ran every test she could think of. Blood pressure, allergies, CT scan of my sinuses. Everything came back normal. Probably just stress from your research, she said. Maybe the dry lab air. But here's what was really unsettling. The nosebleeds always happened right before I had those underwater dreams. Like, always. And the dreams were becoming more vivid, more detailed. I wasn't just swimming anymore. I was breathing underwater, but it felt wrong. Like the water was too thick, too warm. And there were these beings. They were tall, with elongated limbs, and their skin had this almost translucent quality. But I could never see their faces clearly. Every time I tried to focus on them in the dream, they'd become blurry, indistinct. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, blood still dripping from my nose. Sometimes I'd find sand in my bed, even though I live miles from the ocean. Sometimes my pajamas would be slightly damp with what smelled like salt water. I started keeping a dream journal, trying to make sense of it all. But reading back through those entries now, I don't know if they were dreams at all. And that terrifies me more than anything else. Then came the night that changed everything. October 30th, 2023. Halloween was the next day, which is why I remember the date so clearly. I was supposed to meet my grad school friends at this bar in Federal Hill to celebrate finishing our research presentations. But I was running late because I'd stayed at the lab trying to finish analyzing some water samples from Narragansett Bay that were showing really unusual bacterial activity. The samples were wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. The bacterial colonies were forming patterns that didn't occur in nature. Perfect geometric shapes, like they were being directed by some kind of intelligence. Or maybe I was just seeing patterns where none existed because my mind was already starting to fracture. I honestly don't know anymore. I should have left those samples alone. I should have gone home. But I'm a scientist, you know. When something doesn't make sense, you investigate. You don't run away. So I left the marine science building around 8:45 p.m., my head pounding from staring at microscope slides all day. I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts on Thayer Street to grab some coffee for the drive, thinking caffeine would help clear my head. I parked in their lot, checked my phone. It was 9:08 p.m. I remember thinking I should text my friends that I was going to be late. I was sitting there in my Toyota Corolla adding cream to my coffee when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There was this light moving across the parking lot. Not a streetlight or car headlight. This was different. It was this pale blue-green color, almost like the bioluminescence I studied but way brighter, and it seemed to be floating about 8 feet off the ground, moving in this slow, deliberate pattern. My first thought was, okay, someone's playing with a drone or something. But there was no sound. None at all. And the light was too bright, too focused, too purposeful. I turned to look directly at it. And that's when everything went wrong. Or maybe that's when I had some kind of breakdown. I honestly can't tell the difference anymore. The light suddenly intensified, became so bright I couldn't see anything else. I tried to shield my eyes, but I couldn't move my arms. I couldn't move anything. I was completely paralyzed, but not like falling asleep. This was different. I was fully conscious, fully aware, but my body just stopped responding. and then I heard this sound. Oh my God. I can still hear it when I close my eyes. It wasn't coming from outside the car. It was inside my head, like a low-frequency vibration that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. And with that sound came this overwhelming sense of wrongness. Not normal fear, you know. This was something deeper. Like every instinct I had was screaming that something terrible was happening. But I couldn't do anything to stop it. The next thing I clearly remember is sitting in my car again, but now I was parked on some coastal road I'd never seen before. My phone said 12:52 a.m. Nearly 4 hours had passed, and I had no idea where I was or how I'd gotten there. But I wasn't the same person who had parked at Dunkin' Donuts. Something fundamental had changed, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I was completely disoriented, but also different. My whole body felt wrong. Not painful, just not mine. Like I was wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. My vision was sharper than it had ever been, and I could hear sounds that shouldn't have been audible, like the electrical hum of power lines blocks away. I looked around and realized I was parked at what looked like Point Judith, but in a section I'd never explored during all my field work. The ocean was in front of me, and there were these rock formations that seemed arranged, like someone had placed them in specific positions for a purpose I couldn't understand. My coffee was still in the cup holder, but now it was ice cold. My phone had 7 missed calls from my friends and 4 texts asking where I was. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I couldn't remember anything. Not driving there, not getting out of the car, nothing. Just that bright light and then emptiness. I sat in that car for I don't know how long, just shaking and trying to piece together what had happened. Had I fallen asleep? Had some kind of medical episode? Was I having a psychotic break? But I felt completely lucid, completely aware. I just couldn't access those 4 hours of my life. There was a nosebleed. I could taste the metallic residue in my mouth, but when I checked the mirror, there was no blood visible, like it had happened hours ago and been cleaned up, but I had no memory of cleaning it. And there was something under my fingernails. Not dirt, but this crystalline substance that seemed to catch the moonlight in strange ways. I tried to scrape it out, but it was embedded deep, like it had been there for a long time. The drive home was terrifying, not because of anything I saw, but because of what I didn't know. Had I been unconscious for 4 hours? Had someone taken me somewhere? Had I done something during that time that I couldn't remember? Every shadow looked threatening. Every reflection in my rearview mirror seemed like something watching me. I'd never experienced paranoia like that before, this constant, crushing awareness that something was fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't identify what. When I got back to my apartment in Providence, I immediately ran to the bathroom and started examining myself in the mirror. I looked normal. No injuries, no marks, nothing obviously wrong. But I felt like I was looking at a stranger. My reflection seemed off. Like the proportions were slightly wrong, or the lighting was creating shadows where there shouldn't be any. I kept staring at my own face, trying to figure out what was different, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I called in sick to work the next day and the day after that. I couldn't face my colleagues, couldn't pretend everything was normal when I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Dr. Peterson, my research advisor, kept calling, asking if I was okay. How could I tell him that I thought I was having a breakdown, that I'd lost 4 hours of my life and couldn't explain what had happened to me? When I finally went back to the lab a week later, everything felt different. The equipment I'd been using for years suddenly made sense in ways it never had before. I could predict the behavior of marine organisms with uncanny accuracy. I could identify species I'd never studied just by looking at them. But was that real? Or was I just imagining it because I desperately needed to believe something positive had come from this experience? My colleagues noticed the changes too. Sarah, my lab partner, kept staring at me during meetings. "Aria," she said one day, "are you feeling okay? You seem different. More focused, but also more intense. More intense." If she only knew what I was really thinking, she'd probably recommend I check myself into a psychiatric facility. I tried to rationalize my new abilities as improved observation skills, better focus, whatever. But inside, I was falling apart. The nightmares got worse, more vivid, more detailed. I'd wake up with knowledge about marine ecosystems that I'd never studied, understanding of underwater geology that was beyond my training. Was my subconscious mind just processing information I'd absorbed over years of study? Or was something else happening to me? The nosebleeds continued. Every few days I'd suddenly start bleeding. Not just from my nose anymore, but sometimes I'd wake up with blood on my pillow from my ears. But when I'd examine myself, there was never any obvious source. I went to 3 different doctors, ENT specialists, neurologists, even a psychiatrist who my regular doctor recommended. They all said variations of the same thing. My tests were normal, but there were some unusual patterns in my brain activity that they couldn't fully explain. Probably just stress-related, they said. Maybe you need to take some time off from your research. But taking time off made everything worse. Alone with my thoughts, I started questioning everything. My memory, my perceptions, my sanity. Had any of this really happened? Or was I just having an elaborate psychological breakdown? I started researching missing time experiences online, looking for some kind of explanation. Most of what I found was either clearly fabricated or so outlandish that I couldn't take it seriously, but there were a few accounts from people who seemed credible, scientists, professionals, people like me who had no reason to make up these stories. And their descriptions matched what I was experiencing perfectly. The missing time, the enhanced abilities, the sense of being changed in ways they couldn't explain. That's when I found Dr. Rebecca Stone, a neurologist from Boston who had been quietly studying what she called consciousness displacement events for over 15 years. I was so desperate for answers that I drove up to meet with her in January 2024. Her office was completely normal. Nothing like the conspiracy theory setup I'd been expecting. Dr. Stone was this incredibly professional woman in her 50s, and she listened to my story without any judgment or skepticism. When I finished, she said something that both terrified and relieved me. "Aria, you're the 14th marine scientist who's contacted me with experiences almost identical to yours. There's definitely a pattern here. 14 marine scientists, all experiencing missing time, all developing enhanced abilities related to our field, all questioning our own sanity." Dr. Stone explained her theory about what she called selective consciousness interaction, the idea that advanced intelligences might be making contact with humans who have specific skill sets or knowledge bases, but the interaction happens at a level of consciousness that our normal waking minds can't process or remember. "But why don't I remember any of it?" I asked her. "Because your conscious mind isn't equipped to process that kind of experience," she said. "It's like trying to run advanced software on outdated hardware. The information gets transferred, but the memory of the process gets fragmented or lost." She connected me with other researchers who'd had similar experiences. David, a marine engineer from San Diego, Maria, an oceanographer from Miami, Dr. James Wright, a marine geologist from Seattle. We started meeting regularly, first online, then in person. All of us had the same story: missing time, enhanced abilities, and this constant question of whether we were losing our minds or if something extraordinary was really happening to us. What we discovered was that all of our experiences were connected to specific oceanic locations where there had been unexplained phenomena for decades. Narragansett Bay, where I'd been having my encounters, had reports of unusual underwater activities going back to the 1970s. But here's what really made me question everything. When we compared our experiences, the details were so similar that either we were all having the same type of breakdown or something was really happening. The missing time wasn't random. It always occurred when we were near bodies of water, usually when we were alone and working on research related to marine ecosystems. The enhanced abilities were always specific to our areas of expertise. The physical symptoms, nosebleeds, changes in sensory perception, difficulty sleeping, were identical across all of us. Dr. Stone's working theory is that we're being contacted by some form of intelligence that exists in Earth's oceans but operates on a different consciousness frequency than humans. The missing time experiences happen because our minds can't process direct contact with this intelligence, but the information exchange still occurs at a subconscious level. "Think of it like trying to download files while you're asleep," she explained. "You don't remember the process, but when you wake up, the information is there." This gave me a framework for understanding what might be happening to me, but it didn't make the experience any less terrifying. Am I really in contact with some form of non-human intelligence, or am I part of a group delusion involving highly educated people who should know better? I honestly don't know anymore. Some days I'm convinced that everything has a rational explanation and I just need to find it. Other days, I'm equally convinced that something extraordinary is happening, and I'm just too limited by my human perspective to fully understand it. The missing time experiences have continued. Not regularly, but every few months I'll find myself somewhere I don't remember going, with hours I can't account for. Each time, I come back with new knowledge, new abilities, new questions about my own sanity. My research capabilities have expanded beyond anything that should be possible with conventional training. I can predict ecosystem changes weeks before they become visible to standard monitoring equipment. I can identify pollution sources by analyzing water samples in ways that shouldn't work but consistently do. Is this the result of enhanced pattern recognition from whatever happened to me during those missing hours? Or am I just more observant now because I'm hyper-aware of everything around me? I don't know, and that uncertainty is what's really driving me crazy. What I do know is that I can't keep this to myself anymore. Whether this is a psychological phenomenon or something genuinely anomalous, there are other people experiencing the same thing, and maybe by talking about it openly, we can figure out what's really happening to us. The missing time isn't just missing, it's filled with something I can't access or understand. But the effects are real, the changes are real, and the questions are real. I just don't know if the answers will help me understand what's happening, or if they'll finally confirm that I've lost my grip on reality completely. Either way, I need to know. Because living with this uncertainty is worse than any answer I might find. The missing time experiences are continuing, and I still don't know if I'm gaining something extraordinary or losing my mind. Maybe both, maybe neither. But I'm not giving up on finding out, you know?